Over the past 48 hours, something unusual has been unfolding across multiple cities. Large crowds have gathered in public squares, outside government buildings, and near major transport hubs. These weren't isolated incidents. They happened simultaneously in different locations, involving thousands of people. This didn't start in one place, and it didn't happen all at once. What we're seeing now is the result of weeks of accumulated pressure, multiple smaller events converging into something larger and more visible. The scenes captured on camera show dense gatherings, police presence, and streets temporarily closed to traffic. But understanding what's actually happening requires looking beyond the surface. These crowds didn't materialize out of nowhere, and they're not driven by a single cause or unified leadership. What's emerging is a pattern, one that suggests underlying tensions that have been building for some time. The question isn't just what happened today or yesterday, it's what's been happening beneath the surface that made these gatherings possible in the first place. So far, official sources have confirmed the presence of large gatherings in at least 7 major cities. Police departments have acknowledged deploying additional officers to monitor these areas, primarily to manage traffic flow and ensure public safety. In several locations, authorities temporarily restricted access to certain streets and public transit routes. These measures were described as precautionary rather than reactive to specific incidents. No major injuries have been officially reported, though some localized confrontations between protesters and police have been documented. City officials have issued statements calling for calm and urging people to avoid congested areas. However, what's notable is what hasn't been confirmed. Authorities have not attributed these gatherings to any single organizing group or specific trigger event. There's been no official declaration linking the crowds across different cities, though the timing and nature of the gatherings suggest some level of coordination or shared motivation. Now, what we can say with certainty is that these are not spontaneous eruptions. They follow a pattern of growing public presence in urban centers over recent weeks, escalating from smaller demonstrations to the scale we're witnessing now. To understand how we arrived at this point, we need to look back several weeks. The first signs appeared as scattered protests, often small in scale, focused on local grievances. Workers gathered outside municipal buildings, demanding action on wage disputes. Students organized marches calling for policy changes. Community groups held vigils in response to incidents they felt were being ignored. These events weren't connected at first, at least not visibly, but over time a pattern emerged. Each gathering seemed to inspire another. Social media played a role, certainly. Announcements circulated online, often with vague calls to action rather than detailed plans. The language used was broad, speaking to general dissatisfaction rather than specific demands. This made the gatherings accessible to people with different concerns, creating a kind of umbrella effect. As word spread, participation grew. What started as dozens became hundreds, then thousands. The shift from localized events to coordinated gatherings across multiple cities suggests that whatever frustrations people were feeling, they were shared widely. This wasn't a top-down mobilization. It was more like a series of parallel reactions to similar pressures, eventually converging into visible collective action. When you look at the crowds themselves, what's striking is their diversity. These aren't homogeneous groups. You see people of different ages, backgrounds, and apparent motivations standing in the same spaces. Some are clearly there to protest, carrying signs and chanting slogans. Others appear to be observers, drawn by curiosity or a sense that something significant is happening. There are families with children, elderly individuals, young adults, and middle-aged workers. This heterogeneity makes it difficult to define the movement in simple terms. There's no single leader or spokesperson that everyone recognizes. No unified manifesto or clear set of demands that applies universally. What seems to unite people is less about agreement on specifics and more about shared feelings of frustration, uncertainty, or a desire to be heard. This lack of formal structure gives the gatherings a fluid, almost organic quality. It also makes them harder for authorities to negotiate with or address directly, because there's no clear channel for dialogue or resolution. The response from authorities has been measured but visible. Police presence has increased significantly in areas where crowds have gathered. Officers have been deployed not to disperse people immediately, but to establish perimeters, control access points, and monitor for potential escalation. In some cities, riot police were positioned nearby but held back unless situations intensified. The strategy appears to be one of containment rather than confrontation. Traffic has been rerouted, public transport adjusted, and in some cases, businesses advised to close temporarily for safety reasons. These are standard protocols for managing large public gatherings, but the scale and simultaneity of events have stretched resources. Police departments are used to handling one major event at a time, with the ability to call in reinforcements from neighboring areas. When multiple cities experience similar situations at once, that mutual aid becomes limited. This has led to some criticism that authorities were unprepared, though others argue that no reasonable level of preparation could have anticipated this particular convergence. What's clear is that the official response has been reactive, adapting to events as they unfold rather than anticipating or preventing them. To understand why these gatherings are happening now, we need to examine the underlying conditions that created the space for them. Economic pressure is a significant factor. The cost of living has risen steadily over recent years, outpacing wage growth for many workers. Housing, food, transportation, and basic services have all become more expensive, squeezing household budgets. For people already living paycheck to paycheck, even small increases can feel catastrophic. This isn't abstract policy discussion for those affected. It's daily stress, difficult choices, and a sense that stability is slipping away. Beyond economics, there's a broader feeling of insecurity. Public services that people once relied on seem strained or diminished. Infrastructure feels neglected. Promises made by officials don't seem to materialize. Over time, this erodes trust in institutions. When trust erodes, people become more willing to express dissatisfaction publicly, even if they're not certain what specific change they're demanding. There's also the psychological impact of repetition. When similar events happen repeatedly, when protests and gatherings become part of the regular news cycle, they normalize. Participation becomes less daunting. People who might have stayed home a year ago now feel that joining a crowd is a legitimate, even necessary, way to make their voice heard. This creates a feedback loop. Each gathering makes the next one more likely, more familiar, and potentially larger. Social media and digital communication have undoubtedly played a role in shaping how these events are perceived and participated in. Videos and images circulate rapidly, often stripped of context. A 30-second clip can make a gathering look either peaceful or chaotic, depending on what's included and what's left out. This affects public perception significantly. Someone watching from home sees fragments, not the full picture. They might see police advancing, but not what preceded it. They might see crowds chanting, but not hear what's being said. This fragmentation accelerates reactions. People form opinions quickly, share those opinions, and those shares influence others. The result is a kind of parallel narrative that exists alongside the actual events. What's happening on the ground and what's believed to be happening can diverge significantly. This doesn't mean one is true and the other false. It means perception is being shaped by incomplete information, and that incomplete information is spreading faster than verified facts. The challenge this creates is substantial. Authorities struggle to communicate effectively when competing with rapid, emotionally charged narratives. Participants in the crowds may believe they're responding to clear provocations when, in fact, the situation is more ambiguous, and observers form judgments that influence their own behavior, potentially joining future gatherings or hardening their opposition to them. The immediate impacts on cities have been tangible. Public transport systems have experienced disruptions, with buses and trains rerouted or delayed. Commuters face longer journeys, missed appointments, and general inconvenience. Businesses in affected areas have reported reduced foot traffic, with some choosing to close for the day rather than risk damage or deal with restricted access. This has economic consequences, particularly for small businesses already operating on thin margins. Residents living near gathering points have adjusted their routines, avoiding certain streets or staying indoors. Schools in some areas sent students home early or shifted to remote instruction as a precaution. These aren't catastrophic disruptions, but they're significant enough to remind people that large public gatherings have ripple effects. They touch lives beyond those directly participating. For some, this generates sympathy and understanding. For others, it breeds frustration and resentment toward the protesters. This division itself becomes part of the broader tension, adding another layer to an already complex situation. There's much we still don't know. Investigations are ongoing into how these gatherings were organized, whether there's coordination we're not seeing, and what the longer-term trajectory might be. Political leaders are meeting to discuss responses, though no major policy announcements have been made. Will these gatherings continue? Will they escalate or gradually diminish? Will authorities adopt different strategies if events persist? These questions remain open. What's certain is that the situation is still evolving. New information will emerge, narratives will shift, and both participants and observers will adjust their understanding based on what happens next. The absence of clear answers can be uncomfortable, but it's also realistic. Complex social movements don't resolve quickly or neatly. They unfold over time, influenced by countless decisions made by individuals, groups, and institutions. What we're witnessing now is one chapter in a longer story, and it's too early to know how that story will end. When large crowds gather across multiple cities at once, the real story isn't the noise, it's the pressure beneath it. People don't take to the streets in significant numbers without reason. They do so because other channels feel inadequate, because frustrations have accumulated, because they believe collective presence is the only way to be seen or heard. Understanding why these gatherings are happening matters more than simply reacting to the fact that they are. The causes are multiple, layered, and interconnected. Economic strain, eroded trust, repeated patterns of dissatisfaction, all contribute. No single fix will address everything, but acknowledging the complexity is a necessary first step. What's unfolding now reflects deeper currents in society, currents that were present before the crowds appeared and will remain after they disperse. The question isn't just how authorities respond today, it's how all of us collectively address the conditions that made these moments possible. Because if those conditions persist, the gatherings will too.